morning, everyone, and welcome to Fuse Hub's and AIM's second virtual cybersecurity self-assessment workshop. My name is Everton, and I'm Fuse Hub's New York MEP Solutions Director, and I will be your host today. This event was organized in order to help manufacturers in the DoD supply chain gain understanding of the NIST SP 800-1721 requirements and to learn how to do cybersecurity self-assessments along those guidelines. So now just a couple of brief housekeeping notes before we begin. This morning's program will run from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. and we'll conclude the program promptly at 1 p.m. The schedule is as follows. First, we'll have a brief welcome from Mr. Corey Albrecht, the Director of the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing, commonly called AIM, followed by Mr. Jake Mihevik, who is a Dean of STEM at the Mohawk Valley Community College. We call it MVCC, brief. Jake will provide an overview of the cybersecurity issues that the U.S. manufacturing community faces, among other things. Next, the rest of our distinguished speaker lineup will cover the NIST SP 800-1721 in preparation for the actual self-assessment that we will be doing today. At first, our resident cybersecurity expert, Mr. Paul Laporte, the cybersecurity coordinator at AIM, will cover sections 3.1 to 3.12 or somewhere thereabouts. Paul will be followed by Mana Doyle, the manager of the North Country PTAC. And PTAC is a Procurement Technical Assistance Center, for those of you who don't know that. Mana will speak to you about PTAC and the assistance it provides to DoD manufacturers, plus provide important information on SPURS, which is a supplier performance risk system. After Mana, we'll once again be joined by Paul Laporte, who will round out the 14 sections by doing 3.13 to 3.14 or any other section he did not complete when he started. Our final speaker session will include Ms. Vivian Stover, Cyber Range Producer and Business Director, and Dr. Justin Pelletier, PhD, Director of the Cyber Range and Training Center. Both of them are from the Global Cybersecurity Institute, commonly known as GCI, at the Rochester Institute of Technology, RIT for short. Vivian will be speaking about the GCI and the upcoming cybersecurity bootcamp opportunity there. We will then close with an overview of the cybersecurity cohort and grants program from Corey and myself. After that, we'll have a 15-minute break, during which time you can eat, drink, use the bathroom, or just check your teachable registration, etc. Immediately after the break, Corey and I will announce the winners of the $10,000 grant for the GCI bootcamp and the New York MEP $5,000 grants for cyber assessments or remediation through the New York MEP system. It is important to know that you have to be present to win any of these grants. So folks, you'll have to stay through the break and start the program to be a winner. Next, Fuse Hub's Director of Special Project, Kim Lloyd, who's here, will provide some brief instructions before we're split into 4 separate groups, each to a Zoom room with an expert cyber facilitator and a moderator. Finally, the program for this event, which includes the speaker bios, can be found on the web page for this event. This workshop is being recorded, and you'll be able to find it and other cybersecurity recordings at www.newyorkmep.org. Thank you for attending, and please sit back, enjoy, and learn. We'll now begin with Corey. My friend, Corey, please take it away.
Good morning, and thank you, Everton. Hello, everyone. My name is Corey Albrecht, and I am the Center Director for AIM, which is the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing, which is located in the Mohawk Valley region. And on behalf of AIM and Mohawk Valley Community College, I would like to welcome each and every one of you to our final workshop as part of the New York State Cybersecurity Assistance Program. Cybersecurity is becoming increasingly critical, and I commend each and every one of you and your organizations for being here for this morning's self-assessment workshop. I would also like to send a very special thank you to all of today's speakers and the technical experts that will be assisting us with the breakout rooms. With that, again, thanks for taking time out of your busy days and spending it here with us. And as Everton just said, please enjoy the program, sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I'll send it back to you, Everton. Thank you.
Thank you. I had my mute button off on. Thank you, Corey. At this point, we'll move on. And is Jake here? We'd like to present Jake Mahivik at this time. Jake, please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Everton. And thank you, Corey, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here. My presentation is a lot about the threats that we face and what a big challenge cybersecurity is to our country. And this meeting and your willingness to be here is one small part of the solution. So I sincere thank you for being engaged with this topic. I will share my PowerPoint and please let me know if you can see it. Can everyone see the slideshow? Thank you.
Yes.
So my presentation is about the cybersecurity threat landscape, and this is my passion. It is the most interesting field to be in right now. We are constantly seeing new threats and new challenges. So it is an always exciting field to be in. Who am I and why should you listen to me? So I'm the Dean of Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math at Mohawk Valley Community College. I'm the Director of the National Security Agency's Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity Regional Resource Center, and I am the PI for the Center of Academic Excellence National Competition, which will be held next year with 2,000 students across the country, trying to keep my red team out of their systems. I also have a master's degree in cybersecurity from Utica College, and I hold the Network Plus and Security Plus certifications. So through my affiliation with the National Security Agency Center of Academic Excellence program, pre-COVID, I traveled around the country a whole lot, and I have a lot of exposure to what's going on out there. And so I think I can share with you a pretty compelling story and some context as to why you're here today and what we're up against together. I am affiliated with Mohawk Valley Community College as well as the NSA as an educator. However, all the opinions in here are my own, and I'm not sure how much the NSA would agree with everything in here. I'm trying to be as candid as I can be. So the threat landscape is here. We as the United States of America are smack dab in the center of cybercrime, information warfare, and cyber espionage. Those are the triple threat that we're up against. And based on different events and different trends, each of these threats gets larger or smaller, but they've all been persistent over the last decade or longer. And we are constantly up against how to defend ourselves. You'll see a lot in the news about whether we should play offense. Traditionally, the United States does not play offense in cyber warfare. We simply play defense. And that's because the United States sits on top of the largest collection of intellectual property in the history of civilization. We know how to do stuff. And the rest of the world would like to get our secrets and how we do things and how you as manufacturers are so successful. And therefore, a large amount of our cyber budgeting and our cyber effort and capacity is based around defending what we have rather than attacking others. So that's where we stand right now. And I'll address each of these three areas and give you an update and hopefully some background that you may not be aware of into each of these three areas that are threats to us. So this is a warning. I don't know if all of you are my age and appreciate Office Space, but if we could get some good news instead of bad news, that would be great. Warning that this presentation is not very rosy. This is a huge challenge. I don't have a lot of great news to share. I've sprinkled a little in there, but overall, this is a bad news presentation. So I hope you're ready. So I'd like to just kind of start with a little historical note here. The first time cybersecurity really came to national attention was in 2011. And if you can all think back, whether you had children or you yourself was a gamer, back in 2011, the PlayStation Network was the first time everyone could play games against each other. 10 years ago, we were playing on our own computers against ourselves. So that 2011 innovation really changed gaming, and it really changed our whole culture across the country. People were spending lots of time gaming against each other. And the PlayStation Network and Sony, the owner of the PlayStation Network, made a critical cybersecurity error. And it was a known vulnerability. It's something they should have known to protect against. It's one of the most basic attacks. It's called SQL injection. An experienced hacker can enter commands into the username and password field of a web page. And if the information technology systems are not properly configured, rather than putting in Jamie Hevick and the password, a hacker can put in commands in those fields and then get records directly out of the database that's connected to the web page. And in this case, Sony really left the front door wide open. In fact, the hacker was astounded when the most basic of attacks worked. And what happened was all of the user information for the entire Sony network was released. And there were huge lists of usernames, passwords, credit card information all over the darknet for months. So the Sony PlayStation Network had to be taken down. And if any of you remember that period, it was about 2 months. It was a huge thing in our society that no one could play games against each other anymore, and crazy things happened. Families started having dinner together again and being interested in each other's lives. And it was a huge thing. Everyone knew that the PlayStation Network was down and that they had done a terrible job of protecting it. So that was the first time I think the whole nation was aware of cybersecurity and where everything kind of built on top of leading to today. But ransomware is really, it's been prevalent, and as you know, it's taken off recently. The WannaCry ransomware outbreak happened in 2017, and that was another huge eye-opener on an individual level. So this attack was really targeted or was leveraged to target individuals, and lots of people had their computers locked up. And as you can see here, this was May 17th, 2017. About 400,000 people were personally infected with ransomware. And if you haven't been infected with the ransomware, good for you, and count your blessings. You likely will. It's not, have you been infected? It's when will you be infected with ransomware, and how well are you protected and able to recover from it? It's really a simplistic attack. As soon as a hacker gets access to your system, they encrypt everything that's important to you. And it's impossible for you to get that data back without paying them in Bitcoin to descramble your data and get it back. It's truly a horrible feeling. I've been a part of an organization that's been hit by this, and it's crippling, absolutely crippling. And unfortunately, it's been very prevalent. And WannaCry in 2017 was the first example of a widespread, broad attack. But we've seen it proliferate, and it continues to happen. So the ransomware attack doubled in 2019. 621 government agencies, healthcare providers, and schools in the first 9 months of 19 were attacked, largely without repercussions, no problems for the hackers. They got the money that they were looking for. And I'll also note that not all ransomware attacks are reported. Often people will just pay the hackers, and they don't want it to be public that they've been hacked. So that was the 2019 number. In 2020, we saw a 715% increase in ransomware attacks. So we're just exploding in the number of these attacks. And it creates a unique situation for you as owners and protectors of your entities, in that the FBI will tell you, please don't pay the ransom. Every time you pay a malicious hacker for an extortion fee for getting your data back, you're further enabling those hackers. So the FBI will say, please don't do that. And at the same time, your insurance company will say, please pay the ransom. Pay it as quickly as you can. We are covering you for business downtime. Every minute that you don't pay these hackers is costing us money. Pay the ransom. We will provide you with someone who knows how to pay the ransom and how to facilitate a Bitcoin payment. Your insurance company will ask you to pay the ransom as quickly as you can. When you do pay the ransom, you're going to find that they don't do a great job of giving you your data back. What they'll give you is they've made a mess of your data. you will get partial data, and you will need a skilled IT team to reconstruct your data. And but partial data is better than nothing for almost all entities. And what you find is that most organizations end up paying that ransom, taking the data that they get back, even though it's incomplete and frustrating to get it back in that format, and then clean it up and get your systems back online. But that is how ransomware is really all over the place these days. And this is a place called WHERE. It's a website that tracks total ransomware payments across the country or across the world. And as of right now, there's been 91 million reported payments, dollars in reported payments for ransomware extortion. And that obviously goes up every day. That website's pretty neat, Ransom WHERE, and that will tell you where all these payments are coming from. That $91 million equates to roughly 69,000 Bitcoin right now. And I'll note that everyone probably has their own feelings about cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and how that trend has evolved. But I will note, from a law enforcement standpoint and a national security standpoint, cryptocurrency has really been awful. Prior to the advent of cryptocurrency, our monetary system was the way that we found the malicious hackers. It was very difficult for them to evade international law enforcement when we could just track the payments. And with the advent of cryptocurrency, this malicious behavior can be rewarded anonymously and makes it very, very difficult not only to find out who did this, but to follow up and prosecute them. So regardless of how you feel about cryptocurrency, that is one thing that has been a result. So I found this slide, and I thought you all might find this particularly interesting. In 2020, manufacturing was the #1 sector for ransomware attacks. And I believe that's due to a number of factors. Number one, not many manufacturers have taken advantage of a program such as Everton and Corey are offering to help secure their systems. And also, what you have in your operation is so critical that they know that you're likely to pay the ransom because you really need to get back up and running. So that is, I'm glad you are all here because you are the target. So a quick diversion into talking about data breaches. A lot of the password information and a lot of the ways that hackers get into systems is by exploiting and gathering and doing intelligence gathering on data that is out there on the internet right now. And the big companies that you create accounts with are doing a terrible, awful, no good job of protecting your data. Yeah, anytime you put a username and password into a website, number one, you need to be aware that that password is now in a password list that tons of IT folks at that company have access to. If and when that company folds, that list of usernames and passwords is very valuable, and malicious actors within that company may pass that along, which is why we ask you not to use the same password for multiple different websites. And if you created an account with any of these companies that are on the screen, it's likely that your information is out there. The number one place to find out if your information has been hacked and is out there is the website Have I Been Pwned? And that will tell you if you put in an email address whether or not your information has been out there and where you can find it. So I worked for hotjobs.com, which was acquired by Yahoo, and having seen that culture and leaving that company, I'm not surprised that they leaked 3 billion records out there at the time, that they were the worst offender. But you see in here the Target breach, Adult Friend Finder, Equifax, that I'll talk about in a minute. Lots of these companies were hacked, and user data was released on the dark web for a price. But for me personally, kind of as a United States citizen and a consumer of the internet, the most disturbing hack was the Equifax data breach. So unpatched software led to the exposure of credit data on 145.5 million customers. And the hack was so thorough that the hackers had 30 different backdoors in Equifax by the time we were able to find it out and go in there and try to get them out. And the disturbing part is I didn't choose to be a customer of Equifax. There are 3 credit rating agencies out there that tell people who deserves credit and who doesn't. And I didn't choose to give my data at Equifax. They have my data and they didn't protect it. And there were never any negative repercussions for Equifax not protecting my data. Their stock price is right where it was prior to the hack, their market capitalization. We as consumers are not punishing these companies for not protecting our data. And it's creating a really unfortunate reality where we have to kind of assume that our data is not secure. And that leads to this slide, which kind of talks about a way of thinking about our data. Our data is the exhaust of the information age. Every website we visit, every time we log into anything, anytime we send an email, the contents of what we look at may not be available to a hacker or to someone monitoring a network, but the fact that we connected to those pages, that's called metadata, and it's everywhere. It follows us where our cell phone was. We are exhausting. Data is coming out of us every time we access the internet, and it's anywhere for anyone to capture. Worldwide, right now, we create more data per day than we did from the beginning of time until 2004. Every day. That's how much data is everywhere right now. We're swimming in it. And if you know how to mine that data, what we do as individuals is shockingly accessible to the world. Scott McNeely from Sun Microsystems was way ahead of the game in 1999. You have zero privacy anyway, get over it. That was not a widely held view at the time. And 20 years later, he was right on. And for me, the wake-up call was in 2013 in my cybersecurity class. A Proctor High School student told me, privacy is obsolete. Only people your age think it exists. So it's those of us, we try to protect our privacy, but the next generation and in the emergence of the information age, these last 2 quotes are really probably closer to the truth than what we like to think in our generation that we can keep ourselves private. So on to the information warfare part of my presentation. This is a shot of an oil pipeline in Turkey in 2008. And this was the first explosion we saw related to cyber warfare. And this was, we believe that this was really just an accident. This was a skilled hacker who didn't know what system they were in and what flipping certain switches would do and lead to. And it led to the overpressurization of an oil pipeline in Turkey and this explosion. And that was the beginning of us thinking about cybersecurity in a different way, as something that can cause physical damage to our critical infrastructure. But information warfare is really best told through the saga of the Ukraine. The poor Ukrainians, Ukraine is unfortunately for them, really the border between East and West, between the Russians and the Western world, Europe and America. And we've been going back and forth and kind of fighting over the Ukraine for almost 20 years now, since the dissolution of the USSR. The West, we in the West want them allied with us. The Russians want them allied with them. And it's led to just a truly unfortunate situation in Ukraine over the last 20 years. At the bottom of this slide, in kind of the red striped area, you see an island that goes out into the Black Sea, and that is Crimea. It's a wonderful piece of real estate. It has lots of beaches on it. It is the vacation place for everyone in Ukraine. And as you can see, it's bordered on the east to the Russian Federation, and the Russians want it as well. And that is the physical part of the attacks. So a very brief background on Ukraine. Going back to 2004, what you see on the screen is kind of what's been happening over and over again. An election where either a pro-Western or pro-Russian person has been elected. In 2004, it was Viktor Yanukovych for the Russians against Viktor Yushchenko for the Western world. Yushchenko won, and he was president for 6 years. And Yanukovych, the pro-Russian person, was reelected in 2010. So it keeps going back and forth. Interestingly, if you follow the news and the tactics of the Russians, Viktor Yushchenko, the pro-American candidate, was poisoned 2 weeks before the election. That is the candidate on the right prior to being poisoned and on the left after being poisoned right before the election. So I think you all that follow the news are seeing kind of a similar trend here of how the Russians interact with politicians in other countries. So this is where the cybersecurity aspect really comes in. Is so finally the Russian leader was thrown out of Ukraine in 2014, if you remember the Orange Revolution, and the Russians were not happy about that. And so the first thing that they did was they invaded and annexed Crimea in April of 2014. And then they wanted to undermine the pro-American government that was now in place, that had replaced them. And they did so by undermining the ability of the pro-Western government to deliver basic services across the country, attacking media, energy, finance, transportation, government, you name it. The Russian cyber warfare capability was unleashed on the new pro-Western government in Ukraine. And they really went after everything. In 2015, the whole country endured 2 12-hour-long blackouts, affecting about 100,000 people. The Russians basically turned the lights out. They wanted to show everybody that this government can't even keep the lights on. And then in a way to undermine the country further, the new government, the Ukrainian finance ministry lost almost everything they know about how to make a budget and run the country. It was just destroyed. Hard drives were just wiped out by the kill disk virus in 2016. So what we've learned as cybersecurity researchers is we can study what Russia is going to do to the rest of the world by seeing what they're doing to the Ukraine. And so the Ukraine is their kind of their play area, their sandbox of let's refine our attacks on the Ukrainians and then use them in a worldwide fashion. So some interesting things have happened in this. So the Ukraine at the time moved their government websites to a hosting location in the United States and hoping that our defensive umbrella would cover them, and the Russians kept attacking. And that, creates the cyber war conundrum that we're in right now with the colonial pipeline situation of where is the line between cyber warfare? When does cyber warfare become something that it needs a kinetic response, that we would use actual traditional warfare to respond to? Very interesting question that we don't have the answer to right now. But what we see is those attacks, we see what we call an attack signature. And that means the black energy Trojan, which is a way of getting into systems, delivers the kill disk payload. The kill disk is the thing that actually does bad stuff. And kill disk is a really basic program that basically just goes in and overwrites everything on your hard drive with ones and zeros. Just indiscriminately destroys hard drives. So that black energy Trojan and the kill disk payload that we saw in Ukraine, we found that within our critical infrastructure in 2014. It had not been activated, but that same signature was found all throughout our critical infrastructure. So we know what happens in Ukraine is likely to happen to us someday. And we're working, that's why we study the Ukraine so closely. The most recent example of this is NotPetya. And this is a new way to distribute malware. So in 2017, Russian hackers infiltrated the Lycos group, and Lycos is the Ukrainian version of QuickBooks. Everybody runs it. It's connected to the web. QuickBooks supports it. That's how all these small businesses run their finances. And what they did was, when those small businesses hit, give me a new update, QuickBooks, that update was infected with malicious malware. And so they were able to get access to all these companies that were in Ukraine that were running this Ukrainian version of QuickBooks. And it actually hit Maersk Shipping, FedEx Europe, Merck Pharma. It led to $10 billion in damage. Not coincidentally, it was launched right before the Ukrainian Constitution Day, a day of national pride. It knocked out 4 hospitals in Kiev, 6 power companies, 2 airports, banks, ATM and credit card statements were destroyed. 300 companies were hit. And the best estimate is that 10% of all computers in Ukraine were destroyed by this virus. 1 in 10 computers wiped out by NotPetya. It was just astounding, the level of damage that you saw. So the hackers getting into this QuickBooks company and then infecting the update that would go out to all of the customers, guess what? I said I told you so then. And here in 2020, that is exactly how SolarWinds happened. The malicious hackers got inside SolarWinds, which has an IT.
Hi, I was going to make an appointment with Rachel today at 1 o'clock. Is that available?
Sorry, hold on. We'll
Okay.
I'm sorry. Can someone please mute? So we saw the same exact attack signature with the SolarWinds attack. The SolarWinds company was attacked. It was infiltrated. The SolarWinds runs in the background of tons and tons of companies, 18,000 organizations, and the update to their Orion IT management software contained a hack that allowed them to take down all of the people that were connected with the SolarWinds company. And arguably, this was the most significant supply chain attack in the United States. And interestingly for this group, Kaspersky determined that 18% of the victims were in the manufacturing sector. So this was a way into your organization, which way they would probably leverage to go after even a larger fish in the sea. So we've also seen information warfare on the political front. We've seen the Russians operate to change the outcome of elections in ways that they think benefits them. They aggressively went after Emmanuel Macron in 2017, releasing a bunch of emails that he didn't want made public. And they also hacked the Bundestag in Germany in 2017 and took a whole bunch of embarrassing emails from there as well. In the United States, that thing that they were practicing elsewhere, they brought to the United States in the 2016 election cycle. And it was, we studied this very closely, and what we saw was that in late 2015 and early 2016, the Russians were very focused on dividing us as a country and making us weaker as a country because we were fighting amongst ourselves. And they were responsible for lots of the things that we've all seen on social media on divisive issues like gun control, race relations, pro-choice and pro-life positions. And you've all seen these are memes that say, you're not a real American if you believe this. You'd have to be a special kind of stupid if you think this. And really just flooding social media with things that make us hate each other. And that was their primary approach in late 2016, late 15, early 16. And we saw that they shifted sometime in mid 2016 to help promote the Republican candidate at the time. And they focused their efforts on undermining the Democratic candidate. And they found some easy targets. John Podesta from the Democratic campaign made himself an easy target. Lots of emails from the Democratic campaign were released at embarrassing and unfortunate times in the 2016 election. And we know that they were very, very active at the time. So widely respected researcher Emilio Ferreira found that in that time frame, 20% of all the Twitter content in the 4 weeks prior to the election was generated by 50 million bots, 15 million automated programs distributing all kinds of digital propaganda to try to affect the 2016 election. And in the end, we found that 50,000 Russian-linked automated accounts were tweeting election-related content on Twitter. And that was how they were trying to change the election in a way that they whomever was directing the attacks thought would benefit them at the time. So how did that change? How has that changed in 2020? They are back to making us hate each other again. They're back to creating internal strife and divisiveness. 20 million tweets about COVID and making everyone kind of argue about each other's positions. And about 45% of those were sent by accounts that behave more like bots than humans. And we saw that over 30,000 bots were present in election-related content. And what we see is that they evolve. So the bots in 2016 that were trying to change the election were just lots and lots of messages. And as Twitter figured out how to screen those, in 2018, the hackers figured out a way to make it seem like bots were having a conversation with themselves, so it seemed real. So every time we're in an arms race where every time Twitter, social media, anyone figures out how to filter these bots and the information warfare, they figure out a way to get around it and make themselves seem real. So finally, a tiny sprinkle of good news from my perspective. And this shows the United States and Israel's cyber warfare capabilities. Neither of those countries have acknowledged that they perpetrated this attack, but we widely believe that they did. And that's the Stuxnet cyberworm. So on the screen here, you see two pictures. The first picture is the uranium processing facility in Natanz, Iran. And what you see is a small part of the facility. The vast majority of this facility is underneath that mountain that you see. The Iranians are aware that we would likely bomb any uranium processing facility that we had access to. So they buried this facility underneath something like 8,000 feet of granite, directly underneath that mountain where we can't get it with conventional munitions. And the other picture you see there was the president of Iran at the time, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was especially outspoken about the evils of the United States and what an enemy we were to Iran. And he's smiling and wearing a lab coat because this was a big accomplishment. They had procured the ability to create weapons-grade uranium. And to do that, they needed two things. They needed the expertise, and they imported that from an evil man named A.Q. Khan, who helped Pakistan develop their nuclear weapons capacity. And then they needed the hardware, and that's all those centrifuges you see in the picture. And those were imported from North Korea. So they were able to get both the expertise and the hardware to make weapons-grade nuclear weapons. And it's happening as he walks through this. Those centrifuges are spinning uranium and creating weapons-grade plutonium. It is it's a big accomplishment for the Iranians. And the United States was in a bind. Barack Obama was the president at the time. And what he decided, I believe, again, this is my perspective, was that we would launch Stuxnet on the uranium centrifuge facility in Natanz. And our best information is that the Stuxnet cyber weapon, the most complex cybersecurity program at the time the world had ever seen, got into this facility, infected all of the programmable logic controllers that run those centrifuges, waited until it knew it could do the most damage, and then caused all of those centrifuges to run at twice their design speed and basically melt. At the same time, Stuxnet was displaying all green lights on all the technician consoles saying everything is fine, even though these things are going up in smoke. And by doing so, the best information we have is that we wiped out 90% of those centrifuges. And we think we set back their nuclear enrichment program by about 3 years without a shot fired, without putting an American serviceman or woman in the line of fire. And that was the first time that we believe that the United States played offense, and we did so to great effect. President Obama's decision to launch that weapon had some negative consequences. That Stuxnet weapon is now available on the internet. I have a copy of it and we study it. So when we use that weapon, we all made it easier for everybody else to get better at creating weapons, cyber weapons. So there's a negative to doing that at the time. I take a little bit of pride. We work very closely with the Air Force Research Lab in Rome, New York, and all of the cybersecurity companies around it. It's about 10 miles from my office at Mohawk Valley Community College, and it's very likely that a component of that cyber weapon was created by scientists that I may know and work with 10 miles down the road from me. So we at MVCC are very aware of how important it is that we train up our students well. So the last little piece of the triple threat is the cyber espionage element. And some of you might be up against this. This is mostly, we associate this with the Chinese. And they present us with an interesting conundrum. What's the better national investment? Should you invest billions of dollars over decades in creating great education systems and a university system and researchers and PhDs to do really high level engineering and chemical feats? Or should you just create an advanced cyber espionage unit to steal that from the United States? So they've gone that route. And there's a unit of the People's Liberation Army that has attacked at least 1,000 of our companies since 2016 and has breached at least 140 of them. And when they get in there, they're in there for a long time. They're really good at being very, they don't leave any trail that they're in there, and they leak data very slowly so you don't see it going out, and they persist. So we've seen that in some cases, they're in there for over a year. And in one case, they were in one of our defense contractors for 1,764 days before there was any sign that they were there. And the main way that they do that is spear phishing. We've all seen phishing where we get an email saying, help me, I'm from Nigeria, help me get some money out of the country. But spear phishing is much more malicious and almost impossible to detect. And even I, as a fairly sophisticated computer user, would likely fall victim to this if it was done properly. And what they do is they research you as an individual. They find out who your friends are and what you like to do with them. So in my case, they would find out that I like to ride Skidoo snowmobiles and I go riding with my friend Phil Potosik. And they would craft a fake email from someone that looks like they're Phil Potosik. They would embed an infected document in there of the Skidoo catalog for next year's sleds. And I would receive an email that looks like it's from Phil Potosik about something we do together. And I'd likely open that attachment. And when I open that attachment, I would infect my company and I would never know that I had done that. And that is spear phishing, and it's really, really hard to combat. So that's a picture of the Chinese military unit, the building that they live in or work in as they attack us. We've seen lots of, this was researched by Dmitry Alperovich from McAfee at the time, found Operation Shady Rat is a remote access tool. That's where they found that they were in all of our government systems, and this was 2013. This is a really good example. On the right, you see the US F-35, kind of the pride of our defense industrial systems right now, that spent billions and billions and billions of dollars developing that F-35. And in 2016, China released the J-31. Do you notice any similarities? So we developed a university system and designed our F-35. China attempted to just steal it from us. Two different ways to go about it. And that's why cyber espionage is such a major effect on us. And we've seen that the Chinese have the ability to take over our satellites. And we've seen the Chinese do a great job of being in systems and not letting us know that they're there. So given all those threats, one question you might ask is, why is this happening? Why aren't we better defended? Why do leaders of both government and industry decide to underinvest in cybersecurity? And Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winning economist who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow is the name of his book, which is really interesting and worth a read. He developed the prospect theory. And the prospect theory addresses how human beings treat gains and losses differently in our minds. So this is the remote yet interactive part of this presentation. So I hope you all can stick with me and participate a little bit. We're going to do a little test on all of you. So given a choice, to receive a guaranteed $500 or to have a 50-50 chance to win 1,000? Which would you choose? So I would say you can either have a guaranteed 500, I'll hand you this 500, or I'll give you a 50-50 chance to win 1,000. Which would you choose? So I can't hear everybody, but it's very likely that the vast majority of you said, give me the guaranteed 500. And the research will show that about 95% of human beings will choose that guaranteed 500. Okay, so now flip the situation to loss. Confronted with a guaranteed loss of 500. So you're automatically gonna lose 500, or I'm gonna give you a 50-50 chance that you would either lose, that you might lose nothing. You'll either lose $1,000 or lose nothing. Which would you choose? Guaranteed loss, or take a chance that you might lose nothing? And all the research shows that the vast majority of humans will choose, let me take the chance of losing nothing. If there's a chance I'm not going to lose anything, let's go with that option. And so humans, and therefore our leaders, and those of you in the room with us today, are likely to take a chance that maybe we won't invest in cyber defense because there's a chance I will lose nothing. And so it's not your fault if you've made that decision. It's in your DNA, based on the research of Kahneman. And we treat, all humans treat loss and gain differently based on our genetics and our instincts. So what does that look like nationwide? The United States we spend $13 billion on the USS Gerald Ford, our newest aircraft carrier, and we have 2 more under contract at $14 and $15 billion each. Out of a $716 billion federal defense budget, only $15 billion is authorized for cybersecurity related activities. We're really underinvesting. We've, under the Trump administration, the two most powerful and knowledgeable advisors on cybersecurity were dismissed and left the White House and were not replaced. And the Office of Cybersecurity Advisor was removed from the National Cybersecurity Council, the NSC. So in that timeline, we really did not have high-level cyber people in the White House. That has changed as of this year. The newest National Defense Authorization creates the Office of the National Cyber Director, and there's a dramatic increase for CISA, which is very welcome. But what it comes down to is right now, we have a dramatic workforce shortage in the United States. The forces of good are dramatically outnumbered by the forces of evil. And it's just a balance that we cannot win, given the dramatic difference between how many people are attacking us and how many people we have defending. This is from cyberseek.org. This is a really cool website that'll show you the workforce shortage nationwide and where it is and how big it is. Right now, there are 464,000 unfilled cybersecurity jobs in the country out of an existing workforce of about 1 million. So about a third of the jobs in cyber are unfilled, and there's 36,000 missing in the federal government. And these are not cheap jobs either. Right now, there are no, if you search for cybersecurity on Indeed, they're all $70,000 and above in salary. So the jobs are there, the incentives are there. We're just not producing enough cybersecurity professionals. And what that means for the government is we're really good at developing advanced weapons like Stuxnet, but we can't defend our front door. And in the government, we've seen just lots of hackers come in and steal our stuff, including our cyber weapons. And the worst of all being the hack of the Office of Personnel Management, stealing lots of clearance forms. So all of our cyber warriors and people that anyone who gets a clearance from the federal government needs to fill out a form about anything they may possibly have done bad in the past. Someone broke in and stole a whole bunch of those forms from the Office of Personnel Management, which was really hurtful to those that have clearances. So we have seen just an outbreak of all kinds of bad stuff happening because we just don't have enough people defending us. And we're working to fix that at MVCC. We're a center of academic excellence in cyber defense. one of 40 community colleges across the country that hold that distinction. And we're a regional resource center for that national group of cyber educators, and enrollment continues to take off. One of the things that we do well at MVCC is we have the Central New York Hackathon. We do this twice a year where students from across the region, about 110 per semester, come together and try to keep our red team out of their systems. So our students are actually doing it. They're defending systems from simulated malicious attacks in our virtual space. And that makes them ready to hit the workforce, which is important because we're getting feedback, and this is from this year, when we ask industry, can our students perform as soon as they start working for you? And the answer is kind of a big meh. They can kind of do it. And you can see here that to some degree our students are doing it, but most industry right now are saying your students are okay, and we're working to fix that. There are 55 colleges and universities in our kind of elite education group right now, and that grows every day. We're sharing resources. We're helping train all of our new faculty and doing national initiatives like the national competition. So some takeaways from that I hope you take from this presentation. There are significant threats from cybercrime, information warfare, and cyber espionage. They are all around us. They morph about how big and how significant the threats are in any given time, but they never go away. We in the United States are great at developing advanced tools and cyber weapons. We just don't have enough boots on the ground to defend everybody right now. We're working on it. And small manufacturers have a limited attack surface. You can make it so that there aren't that many ways into your company with the help of Paul Laporte and Corey and Everton, and investing in those secure practices and understanding who the threats are and how they might try to exploit you. You might be able to mitigate most of your exposure and do your best to not be on the list of those that have been attacked and victims of ransomware. So that is my lightning presentation. I hope that gives you an idea of what we're up against and some of the context and why it is so important that you are here. And a personal thank you from me as someone that's trying to help solve this problem. Thank you all for being here and for helping stop this threat from being quite so prevalent.
Thank you very much, Jake. Excellent presentation. Really appreciate it as always. So at this point, we'll move to our next speaker, which is Mr. Paul Laporte. So Paul, you're up.
Okay, thank you very much, Everton. Thank you again, Jake, for that always enlightening presentation. I always like to joke that, Jake usually leads into a lot of the presentations I do, and I usually follow him. And I always say that Jake's kind of goal is to scare everybody with all of the terrible things that have happened or can potentially happen. And now it's my part of the presentation, which my job is to kind of explain that even though, we don't have the boots on the ground, like Jake mentioned, my personal philosophy is that you need to be the boots for yourself. And part of that comes with just making sure that you're taking certain steps to protect yourself. And that is really what these requirements are all about as far as the 800-171 goes. And that is the reason that they have been put forward by the Department of Defense. And now I can't get too much into like the philosophy of things because we have a lot of material to cover in a fairly short period of time. What really this presentation is going to be is it's going to be a high level overview of what the 800-171 is, kind of some key concepts, and then we're going to break that down into more detail in the second half. That'll take place this afternoon. So I would encourage you as we go through this specific part to just take notes on any questions you might have on specific areas. Then we can address those in the breakout rooms in the second part. But the 800-171, if we move on to our next slide here, NIST stands for the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. As an organization, they provide data information and guidance on a wide variety of scientific and technological subjects. It's not just cybersecurity related. There's a whole bunch of other technical guidelines that they introduce as well. But one of those items is the NIST 800-171, which specifically provides guidance for protecting CUI in non-federal systems. Now, CUI stands for Controlled Unclassified Information, and loosely it can be defined as as the information that the government does not want publicly available about their goings on in their different projects, but it's not stuff that's sensitive enough to be considered classified and need like a specific government clearance to have. There's one of the biggest questions I get from manufacturers is, how do I know what is CUI in the projects I'm working on? There are actual specific markings on documents that contain CUI, and I do have the link there for that. Archives.gov/CUI has some examples of what CUI might be and what those headings might look like. I always do say, though, if you're confused, check with your IT or with your contractor who is working with the Department of Defense, so your prime contractor, or if you're a prime yourself, you know, the DoD or whatever branch of the government you're working with, they should be able to provide you with that information. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. I like to say the shorthand for it is that treat everything that you're working on that is related to the government as having CUI, and then you'll kind of cover yourself that way. Now, it's worth noting that the 800-171 requirements are not a specific certification. So if you're in manufacturing and you're used to working with things like AS9100 or ISO certifications, it's not quite that. It is a set of guidelines and recommendations for you to follow, and those guidelines are self-assessed. So you're really just looking at things yourself. It is not a specific certification. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the DFARS clause, but moving on to the next slide here. The standard is divided into 14 different families. So these cover kind of a wide range of subjects for information technology. It's not just IT related things. There are things in here that have to do with training, policies, physical security, personnel security. It kind of is a very holistic approach to cybersecurity, because when we're looking at cybersecurity, another term for that is information security. And information security is really just protecting all the data that you don't want going to somebody else. And that can be on a server, on a computer, written down on paper. There's a lot of different varieties it can go through. So that's why these guidelines are broken up into a pretty wide subset across these 14 sections. Now, the DFARS clause, the actual clause in the contract that you're going to be looking for that's going to say whether or not you need to follow these guidelines is this one, DFARS clause 252.204-7012. DFARS stands for the Defense Federal Acquisition Supplement. These are regulations and clauses that are in government contracts. This is what is issued by the Department of Defense, and it requires contractors handling CUI to meet these 800-171 requirements. So again, 800-171 is the guidelines. This DFARS clause is actually the contractual clause that you need to meet. Sometimes there's a little confusion between those two, but that's the way it kind of breaks out. And again, this is self-assessed by the holder of the contract or the person who is applying for the contract. So if you have won the contract already, or if you're applying for it, you need to meet these things. Now, fortunately, you do not need to meet all of their 800-171 requirements in order to bid for or be awarded for a contract. You don't have to be doing everything in the 110 items that are recommended, but what you do need are two different things. The first is a system security plan. This provides outlines of the current security practices and procedures in place by the company for review. So this basically applies to all of the areas of the NIST 800-171 requirements that you are currently meeting. And whenever I go into a place, they always think that they're not going to be meeting any of them or anything like that. I've never once gone into a company that was doing absolutely nothing. There are some things that you're going to need to do, but there's probably more of these requirements that you're meeting than you may already think, especially if you're working with, you know, a dedicated IT team or IT administrator, or working with a third-party contractor. A lot of the things that they do just for their own efficiency and convenience probably carry into this in some sort of way. Second thing you're going to need is a POAM, or a plan of action with milestones. And this provides an outline for the security practices and policies and needs of remediation. So these are for the items in the 800-171 that are not currently being met. So these are the things that you actually need to do, as opposed to the things that you are doing right now. When you write these things down, you need to outline those specific areas, and then you need to also provide details for what you are planning to do to meet those requirements. So the remediation steps, you know, do you need to upgrade your operating systems? Do you need to write policies for your employees? And if you are, what are the details as far as the timeline goes for that? So when are you planning on getting it done by? if there is multiple steps, what are you looking to do in the interval? So what's step 1, what's step 2, what's step 3, and when do you plan on doing those by? Those are the things that you're going to need in your plan of action milestones. Now, for both of these documents, there's no specific template or format. The government doesn't particularly care what it looks like. It cares more about the content that's in there that you can provide to the contractors or anything like that. Now, it has been a little bit more streamlined with the SPRS system in terms of self-reporting, but our friends at PTAC will be getting onto that a little later on in the presentation. Just doing a quick time check here so I know how much I have to cover in this specific section. Okay, so we're going till 10:30. That's half hour. Great. Okay, so with all of you registering for this workshop, you were given a link to Teachable. So this is the online training course that we use for people who want to go through the full version of this self-assessment program. So this is broken out into, I think, 15 different sections. Each section has a very, about 30 to 45 minutes of lecture on each section, as well as a quiz at the end of each of those things. So if you want to really break down and go into the very detailed aspects of the self-assessment, then I would recommend going through that entire course. But for today's workshop, there are a couple things that are going to be in that for you as well. So in the course introduction section, right in the beginning, there's a couple different resources that we have for you that'll be helpful when going through this particular process and even going through it on your own. The first is NIST Handbook 162. This provides a summary of all the 800-171 requirements and gives a good clarification and explanations of what each of them mean. They have questionnaires for each item, and so on and so forth. And then the second item is the 800-171 self-assessment worksheet. So this is basically what you can use to kind of make notes about your progress through the assessment. So as you're going through each of these items and whether or not you think you're meeting them or you're not, you can kind of mark yes, no, partial, doesn't apply, whatever that may be. And then you can make notes on the far end of the spreadsheet in terms of why you think you may meet that classification. When we go through and actually do assisted assessments, we use something very similar to this to help organize, where a person or a company is at when going through this assessment. It provides a clear outline of the requirements being met and the ones that need remediation. And then you can use this worksheet as it's kind of a short cheat sheet to build your formal security plan or your plan of action. You can take the items that you are currently meeting, split those off into a separate tab or a whole other worksheet. There's your system security plan. And then for the things you're not doing, you can split that off. And then that's your plan of action. So that's just really kind of a quick introduction. Let's go ahead and start moving into the actual meat of these requirements of the 800-171. First item we're going to be looking at is family 3.1, and that is in regards to access control. So this first part is actually the biggest part of all of the 14 sections. It's the biggest section. It contains about 25% of the overall document because access control is an extremely important part of security. And really in layman's terms, access control is just really controlling how the people who need to access the information get access to that. And for the key concepts for this, we're looking at primarily identity management. So requiring users to authenticate with some sort of username and password, which again, very common for most people. We're all pretty comfortable with having to put in a username or a password for most of the systems that we use in any sort of technological capacity. We want to make sure that that sort of thing is in place for our home network or our cloud-based servers or whatever we're using to allow employees to access our information, specifically the information that might contain CUI. This identity management also gives us an ability to track user activity. So if we have people who have to log in with usernames and passwords, we can use that information to figure out where people are going on our network, what files they are opening, which ones they are creating. If they're deleting any, we can keep a pretty good record of that. And record keeping and tracking and monitoring is just as big of a part of the 800-171 requirements as protecting the information that we are trying to protect and stopping people from accessing it. Speaking of protecting it, another key concept in this section is the concept of least privilege. And that is the idea that we are restricting access to files and systems based on need. So for example, the accounting department does not necessarily need access to our engineering files, and vice versa. Engineering doesn't need access to accounting files. So we're actually configuring our group permissions and our individual user permissions on our servers to restrict them to only access the information that they need to do their work on a day-to-day basis. And this also goes for anybody who might be working with CUI. So if you're working on a government-related project or a CUI-related project, then you will have access to those files. But if you're not working on that project, then you wouldn't need to access those things. And what that does is that minimizes the target that we give attackers. The fewer accounts that they have to gain access to CUI, the tougher it's going to be for them. So we want to minimize that as small as we possibly can. And then the same goes for any other sensitive information we want to protect: financial data, personal data, things like that. Information flow is another important key concept in this section. Information flow just verifies and secures the travel and storage of information, and this can be done via network protection devices and procedures. So again, if you are kind of more IT minded, we're looking at things like firewalls or different network equipment and tools that will allow us, again, to either restrict the flow of information or to monitor it and track it. And then separation of duties, another concept here that we're looking at, and that is dividing privilege functions to multiple employees. So again, the idea that we don't want any one person to have the ability to compromise our systems, to do something malicious or with malintent, and then have the ability to cover their tracks or be the only person who works with this. And we see this a lot with like small companies where, they have one person handling all of the accounting. And then you find out 10 years later that that person was, falsifying sales records and transferring money to their own personal accounts because there was nobody there to kind of check their work. So it's making sure that we are separating those duties. So we have multiple people who have access to these sort of privileged functions. So no one person can do everything on their own and then cover their own tracks. And then this also goes for administrative functions and the ability to audit systems. So again, when we look at our monitoring systems, so like our logging systems are ways to track activity on our network, we may want somebody looking at those systems different from the person who is doing the regular day-to-day administration. So again, if one of those people kind of steps out of line, then the other person can check them. It's kind of a checks and balances system that we want to make sure we have in place at our organization. Account security puts blocks in place to prevent or restrict unauthorized access to CUI. And this can be things like limiting unsuccessful login attempts. So if somebody, tries to put in an incorrect password so many times, after the third, fourth, or fifth time, it'll actually deactivate their account entirely. And then the IT administration needs to reset it. So this prevents people from just guessing passwords over and over and over again until they get the right one. Session timeouts. So if somebody gets up and leaves their computer for a particular period of time, it will either lock the computer, so then they just have to re-put in their password again, and then they're right back to where they are. Or if it's an extended period of time, we actually would prefer that it log the person off completely. So it completely unloads their programs. This is especially important for remote connections and VPN connections. We really don't want something just kind of sitting there for an indefinite amount of time. We want to make sure that a session is only in place when somebody is sitting down and using it. And when somebody is not using it anymore, we want that to be either locked out or severed completely. Privacy and security notices. So making sure that we are providing some sort of notification to the people that are handling our information that what they're handling is privileged, sensitive, contains CUI, whatever language we may want to use. And this can come through a few different ways. The first is a pop-up when we first log in, notifying us, hey, by accessing the system, you are agreeing that you are accessing sensitive information or CUI, and you cannot share any of the information that you are looking at. By clicking OK, you agree to this and agree to all our company policies. And then from a higher up perspective, just in general, company non-disclosure agreements when employees join the company, so they know, again, you're going to be working with some sensitive stuff here. Don't share anything. Here are the rules for sharing things. Make sure that you agree and understand all of this. Remote access controls is another important part of this. So if we are having people who are accessing our network from outside of the office, we need to have some pretty strict controls and guidelines in place for that. And these focus on monitoring and securing remote desktop connections, VPN connections, working from home. Anytime somebody is not in our office and is gaining access to systems within our office, that is very powerful, because then again, anybody, in the world, technically, if they had those proper credentials, could get access to us. So we really want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to protect those things. Wireless network control. So this is for wireless networks, Wi-Fi. In our offices, we want to make sure that if that network has access to a system that contains CUI, that it is being properly protected and is ensuring that the connections are encrypted and secured, making sure that we have separate networks potentially for if we have employees that need to access the server versus people who just need to get access to the internet. We can actually just split the wireless into 2 different subnetworks and only allow people who need to access CUI access to the internal network, and then everybody else can just get to the guest network, is a lot of times what it's called, just the general internet connection, but it won't have access to any of our important systems. And then finally, we want to make sure that we have policies in place regarding mobile device connection. So what are we allowing to be connected to our wireless network? Are we allowing personal devices or devices that we have not given out to employees? If so, what are the rules? What network can they connect to? How do they authenticate? Those are all the things that we need to actually write down and think about and have in place. CUI encryption. This is making sure that if we have any systems that leave the office that could potentially contain CUI, typically, most commonly, these are laptops. We don't really see a lot of CUI storage on phones and tablets and things like that, unless it's something like email access, which that's kind of a separate thing. But if we have files on an owner laptop or sales teams, then we want to make sure that that CUI is encrypted. So just mathematically locked is the best, the most kind of easiest way to describe that. So in the event that that device is lost or stolen, people cannot actually access that data if they were to recover the device. So if they were the ones who stole it, or if they found it and it was lost, they'd be able to see that there's something there, but they wouldn't be able to open it. They wouldn't be able to access it without that specific decryption key. External system control. So this is in regards to the usage of systems not owned or controlled by the company. So this prohibits the storage of CUI on personal or public devices. So again, if we are allowing a BYOD, or bring your own device environment, where employees are bringing in their own laptops or whatnot, what are the rules for that? And what are we doing to protect the CUI that's on there? In general, it's a good idea to just not allow the storage of CUI on anything that isn't specifically issued and controlled by the organization itself. But if you are going to allow that, if you're a very small organization, you're a startup, you only have a few employees and they all have their own laptops, you're going to want to make sure that there are pretty strict rules in place in terms of what they can and can't store on there, and then how you're going to protect that. And then finally, we have publicly accessible systems. So these are systems owned by the company that are meant to be interacted with by the public. Things like web servers, email servers, online marketplaces. These are kind of what we call our publicly facing systems. So these are the things that the people from the outside world can see and they're meant to interact with. We want to make sure that those systems don't contain any sort of CUI that can be, downloaded or copied off onto an uncontrolled environment. So again, that family, biggest one, about a quarter of the standard, about a quarter to a fifth. So that's a lot of information, but the couple of these will be a little bit shorter. Next one we have 800-171 Family 3.2 awareness and training. So this is all specifically in regards to 2 areas. And number one, making sure we have policies written down on how to handle our information, where it's stored, where it's transferred, who's allowed to access it. And then we want to make sure those policies are communicated via some sort of formal, effective employee training. So for building policies, we want to make sure that we're defining and documenting the rules for computer usage, Information handling and incident response policies should be constructed with the help from the IT administrators, HR department, and other departmental supervisors. So again, when we're looking at handling this information, it's not just the IT department that is accessing it and handling it. So we want to make sure that we have everybody who is accessing this information involved in writing the rules for our general employees. So again, human resources, supervisors of different departments, we can all use them to build these policies so they're going to be the most effective and allow for the best combination of security and productivity that we can possibly come up with. So a few examples of what policies we would be looking at constructing. First of all, again, probably the most important one, at least for these requirements, is the definition of CUI, what it is, what projects it may apply to, how to use it, where to store it, how to handle it. If you're transferring it to somebody else, what are the procedures in place for that? All of those things are important. Company PC usage. What are we allowed to do with our company computers? Where are we allowed to go? What are we not allowed to do? This is specifically important for if we have laptops or mobile devices that we're issuing to people that they might be using outside of our office. What are the incident response procedures and help desk request procedures? If somebody has an issue that's either security related or just IT and information related in general, who do they go to? What tools do they use to report that incident? On the end of the administration, what are they doing to keep track of those things and retain them in case we need to provide evidence to a contractor, to the DoD, in the event of an incident, what we did to help mitigate that and what the cause might have been? What are the policies for visitors and guests in terms of accessing our IT resources or even the building itself? Who is escorting these people? Do they have to sign in at a front desk when they come in? All of those things should be written down. Public information and privacy policies. Again, what are we allowing to be shared with the public? What do we not want to be shared with the public? And what specific projects and what specific areas might that apply to? Physical information and clean desk policies. So where are we storing our paper, our blueprints, things like that? If we need to put them away at the end of the day, where are they going? Are they in a secure location, a locked cabinet, something like that? And then finally, personal device usage policies. Again, if somebody is bringing in their own laptops, their own cell phones, whatever they may be, what are the rules for what they can connect to and what information can they access? And then again, once we have all of these policies written down, we want to make sure that we are actually providing some sort of formal training that is officially and effectively communicating policies to employees and providing them with the education needed to handle this information, to prevent attacks from happening, and to spot potential threats before they become a larger issue. So some examples of what we're looking to communicate to our employees is we want to make sure that we are detailing the company policies and best practices that we have outlined in our employee handbooks. If the policies that we have require employees to use specific tools for encrypting files or secure transfer to somebody else, do employees understand how to use those things? So do they know how to send an encrypted email or how to access our VPN securely? We want to make sure that they have understanding of all of those systems. We want to make sure that our employees understand the rules that are written down in our employee handbook, so they know how to safely handle these things, what an attack might look like as far as general awareness and whatnot. We can look at that as well. And then finally, we really want to make sure that the training is providing clarification and answering questions that people might have, because as they read through these policies, they're not going to be terribly familiar with all of them. They may have some questions. They may not understand things. We want to make sure that we let everybody know exactly how everything works so they can do that the most effectively. So, do you have any questions about what information you're handling or how to use it or whatnot? And then we can clear that up for them and allow them to confidently handle the data they're trying to protect. And this training can be conducted by a mixture of the human resources team, IT administrators, and supervisors. So again, not just specifically an IT related thing. We want to make sure that we're kind of holistically involving the entire, kind of upper echelon of the organization whenever we can. Additionally, this employee training, when we're going through and communicating our policies, should have a specific section dedicated to insider threat training. And that is special consideration that's given to damaging and malicious attacks by those within the organization. Not something we like to think about, but the employees that we're giving this access to have a huge level of power. They have access to all the things that we're trying to protect because we gave it to them, because they need it to do their work. So we want to make sure that in the event that they do something that they're not supposed to with this information, other employees know what that looks like and how to report that and who to report that to. So this can be from employees, contractors, vendors, anybody working with us that has access to a privileged level of information. And what we're doing is we are in this training detailing the suspicious activity indicators. So what would it look like if somebody inside our organization was doing something that they shouldn't? This could be trying to access unnecessary information. So they're trying to get access to files for projects they're not working on, or trying to get somebody else's username and password. Unusual behavior or change of habits, or is somebody trying to get into the building at weird times of day outside their shift or on a different shift? Are they acting erratically? Are they making a lot of disgruntled posts on social media? Things like that, what those things might look like. And then once we have those warning signs kind of detailed, we are emphasizing the reporting of it. So who to report it to, and what they're going to do from there. So emphasize the fact that you should be reporting it, and then outlining the contact point. Is it our IT team? Is it a dedicated security officer? Is it their supervisor? Those are all things that we can kind of decide on our own. Next section we have is 3.3. This is audit and accountability. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up the pace here because I think we only have about 10 minutes left in this section, so we have a lot of sections to get through. But 3.3 is really specifically looking at how we are tracking our employee and our network activity in terms of the systems and networks that have access to information that we're trying to protect. So we want to make sure that we have server logs in place that are tracking activity on our file server. These logs can be filtered and customized according to activity for specific users, groups, or locations of files. So specific folders or shared drives, things like that. There are certain tools that are built right into the event viewer in the Windows Server operating systems that most of us are using, but you can also use third-party tools as well to help kind of consolidate those logs with other systems, and then it'll be like a little bit more powerful filtering and report generating tools and whatnot. So network logs are traveling or monitoring the travel on a specific network. They're showing internal and external communication. So it is activity inside and outside of the organization. And these logging systems are typically built into firewalls and networking equipment. And a lot of you may have those systems built into your networks currently, but they may not be turned on, or they may not be properly configured or properly utilized. Once we have those logs that are being generated of that record of activity, both inside and outside of our network, we want to make sure that we're retaining those logs for a particular period of time. At least 30 days, recommended a year, really recommended indefinitely. If you can just keep the logs forever, great. They're not huge files. If you can keep that information for as long as you can, so much the better. We also want to make sure that we're reviewing those logs on a proactive basis rather than just when there's a problem. So we go through once a month, take a look at them, see if anything looks unusual, see if there's anything that we need to give any additional attention to that maybe didn't cause a problem within our organization, but could be if it was left to persist. We want to make sure that the logs are capable of uniquely tracing activity to specific individuals or specific systems that are being used by individuals. So one user per device with employee access to CUI. So again, we want to make sure that we don't have multiple employees using the same account when they're accessing CUI, because then we don't know if there's a problem, who that problem is with. If everybody has their own unique credentials and somebody's information is compromised, we have a very clear picture of where the problem is. But if we have 2, 3, 5, 10 different employees using the same account, the problem could lie within any of them, and it's going to be very difficult to figure out where it is. Again, we want to periodically examine the systems that we are monitoring to determine if there's any sort of changes that need to be made, if there's any other files or systems that have been added that we need to give special attention or consideration to that maybe didn't exist previously, and then updating our our logging procedures accordingly. This review can be done monthly or quarterly, more or less if needed, but you still want to go through periodically. I would say at least quarterly, and just re-review your systems and see, hey, are we paying attention to everything that we need to? Has there been any new projects added in? You know, do we need to change the way that we're doing things? Process failure alerts. So this is making sure that the logging systems are configured to alert the administrator if they stop working, or for additional events. So if we have a security incident where a hard drive fails, or somebody gains access to the network that shouldn't, or somebody's account locks out because we've had so many failed password attempts, you know, we can have additional alerts be generated in those events, or if somebody's privileges change. So all of a sudden somebody has administrative rights who didn't before and we didn't give it to them. That's a big problem. We should generate an alert probably to our IT administrators. Timestamp validity. So this is making sure that for every log that's being generated, there is some sort of record of the time that that event took place in terms of the date and the actual specific time of day. We want to make sure that those timestamps are valid. So they're not, you know, off sync from what the actual time is. Very easy to do. This is almost always built in natively, as far as making sure that we have our systems synced to what are called NTP servers. These are usually to within 1 second of validity. So we can be confident that if something happened on a Tuesday at 5 a.m., it really happened on that date and nothing was like thrown out of whack because our systems weren't set correctly or lost sync due to like a power outage or something like that. And then finally, for this particular section, logging integrity. We want to make sure that these logging systems should only be accessed by authorized individuals, IT administrators, security officers, things like that. We should not be auditing, modifying, or deleting these logs. So we really want this record to be pristine and unchanged. If possible, we should just avoid the ability to delete them or modify them at all. If we are allowing it, we should really heavily investigate and scrutinize what is being done to those logs, just in case, because we don't want something to happen maliciously and then somebody to cover their tracks. And again, as we spoke about earlier, we want to consider separating the IT administration and logging administration, if at all possible. Separation of duties, have 2 different people working on those different areas. Moving on to family 3.4, configuration management. This is specifically looking at making sure that we have effective controls for the inventory of our systems, and when we have any sort of changes to our systems, that there is some sort of process going for the review of that, and that we are approving that, not just allowing people to make changes that we don't want to our systems. So the first step of that is establishing a baseline, taking stock of our current systems and the software installed on those systems, including security configurations as part of that baseline. So the permissions of users, what they have the ability to and not to do, documenting the baselines of those. So basically having some sort of record of what the regular operations of these systems looks like, what software is installed on them, what versions of Windows they're running. And then as changes are made, we update that baseline accordingly. And we want the baseline to highlight unauthorized changes for further analysis. So if somebody made a change to a system that we didn't approve, we want to give that further scrutiny. And then moving in, we want to make sure that if there are any system changes, that we are actually approving those and we're not just allowing people to install programs without our consideration given to it. So this most commonly comes when employees have the ability to install software on their own systems. They have what we call local administrative privileges. In the event that they have those things, we really want to make sure that that they're not just installing whatever they want. Ideally, we want to restrict that entirely just to our specific IT administrators, so they're the only ones that can make changes to our systems. But we want to really give an extra level of scrutiny to what is being installed in our systems, and only allow things that we want onto our machines and onto our network based on, are they secure? Do we need them? Again, the idea of what employees need for their day-to-day work. And then this also includes any sort of changes to the settings that we have. So again, if we're changing employee access in terms of the files that they can get access to, or the permissions they have. anything along those lines. Any sort of changes to hardware or devices, we want to make sure that we're reviewing those as well. And then again, just taking a look really quickly, and then I think we'll wrap up this particular half of the overview. We'll pass it over to our friends at PTAC. We want to consider again what we discussed earlier, the idea of least functionality. So making sure that employees only have access to not just the information, but the functions in our system that they need to do their day-to-day work. We need to take a look at our employees and say, do we want them to install software? Do we need them to install software? Not just for convenience purposes, because we don't want to overload our IT department or anything like that. Do we really want to allow employees to install programs or make changes to like the lockout settings or anything like that? We may find that in certain situations that we do need to do that. A lot of times if we have like an engineer who is doing a lot of work on programming certain machines, they may need those privileges and may need to be able to install software and remove it as needed. That's fine, but we want to make sure that that's the exception and not the rule, that only the people who need to do that have the ability to do that. And this goes further by making sure that we're restricting and disabling non-essential programs, functions, ports, things like that. We can also, from a software perspective, consider some sort of blacklisting or whitelisting program that will actually prevent certain programs from being installed, or in the case of a whitelisting program, will prevent everything from being installed except for the things that we specifically allow. And that can be technologically aided, or that can just be written down in policies and practices. Here's what we allow in our company. Here's what we don't. And in all of those cases, whether or not we are having just the IT administration do that or our employees are doing that, we really should be requiring approval for anything that they're doing. And again, if we're allowing employees to do these things on their own, it's a little bit difficult to enforce. So that's something that we have to consider. Do we really want our employees to be able to install this software, or do we want them to have to go through the IT department? If we want them to do their own installations, we really want to make sure that there's still some sort of approval process they're going through in order to do that. So that is going to take care of the items for 3.1 through 3.4. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Everton, who will hand things off to Mana Doyle from PTAC.
Thank you very much, Paul. Very good job as usual. And thank you for speeding along to keep us on track. Really do appreciate it. At this point, I am going to turn to Mr. Mana Doyle and ask him to come up. So Mana, are you here ready to talk about PTAC? If you are, please take it away.
Okay, let me just share my screen.
And Paul, could you take your slide down, please?
Can everybody see my slide presentation?
We're seeing you, but not the presentation at this
Oh,
point.
whoops. How's
Okay,
that?
there you go. We got it.
All right. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mana Doyle. I'm Program Director of the North Country PTAC. We're associated with APTAC, which is a national organization that covers all of the procurement technical assistance centers across the U.S. Oh, there we go. My territory in New York State goes from Onondaga County all the way up to Clinton County. It's in that area green, but we have different technical assistance centers across New York State. All of us, stand ready to help you with any questions or issues that you may have. A little bit about PTAP. PTAP was created and authorized by Congress in 1985 to provide free assistance in understanding government contracting and to increase the number of businesses capable of participating in the government marketplace. It's not just federal, it's state, local contracts as well. Again, we provide free assistance. So we've got 94 PTACs nationwide plus U.S. territories. We've created or retained 550,000 jobs and a lot, help businesses do $26 billion in contracts. Just a quick overview of what PTAC services look like. We do training workshops and webinars, government to business matchmakers and networking, one-on-one counseling. Will help assess businesses' potential to do business with the government. Will assist with federal and state registrations and certifications, i.e. SAM.gov. We help identify subcontracting opportunities. We help with solicitation and bid preparation and technical post-award performance, i.e. wide area workflow, packaging, labeling, things of that nature. We help to clarify technical information and document specification standards, i.e. DD 2345. We help guide government markets, government marketing and roadmaps, notice of upcoming opportunities with our bid match service. Now we'll get into kind of going over the defense industrial base. So there's multiple things that are part of securing technical data or CUI. JCP DD 2345, basically, to simplify it a little bit, it allows certified US and Canadian contractors to apply for access to DoD and DND unclassified controlled technical data. ITAR and the EAR allow American contractors to export controlled goods to other countries via export licenses. This is also a requirement for all manufacturers handling drawings for items found on the U.S. munitions list, USML Part 121, even if they are not exporting. And now, cyber maturity model certification, vendor risk management, and this is the part that we're really here today. It's another way of tightening that net of security around you and your supply chain for the U.S. Government. So the projected CMMC rollout. So we're in fiscal year 2021. So there's 15 total number of contracts with CMMC requirements, and you see fiscal year 22, it does more than double. And you see as we go out, the further we go out, the more contracts are going to have the CMMC requirement. And as you look at the breakout between level 1 through 5, all of them increase throughout the next 5 years. And in fiscal year 26, all new DoD contracts will contain the CMMC requirement. So current cybersecurity DFARS, DFARS 252.204-7019 and 20 is an interim rule. The compliance steps are, just one moment. So in essence, under DoD methodology, a basic self-assessment starts with a score of 110. And for each NIST 800-171 security requirement the contractor is not fully implemented, the contractor loses points, either 1 point, 3 points, or 5 points, depending on a few different factors. We can look at this like a doctor's physical, a routine assessment to flush out possible symptoms or shortfalls that you didn't realize were there until you did the self-assessment. Once you've done your self-assessment, then you can upload your score into SPURS and plan of action milestones or poems. Let's see. So after you've completed your company's assessment and have created your plan of action, that will get your company's self-assessment score to 110. You will need to enter the date of completion. So once you've got your plan of action, you found out your shortfalls within your system. you've created your plan of action. So you have to have a date of completion to enter in when you upload your SPURS score. And then, because you can do multiple self-assessments as you complete, you might beat that date, but it's good to have your goal set that you will be at 110 by a certain date. Your system security plan, SSP, is a document that outlines how your organization implements its security requirements. And SSP outlines the roles and responsibilities of security personnel. It details the different security standards and guidelines that the organization will follow. An SSP should include high-level diagrams that show how connected systems talk to each other. The organization should outline in its SSP its design philosophy. Design philosophies include defense in-depth strategies, as well as allowed interfaces and network protocols. All information in the SSP should be high level, include enough information in the plan to guide the design implementation of the organization's systems, reference existing policies and procedures in the SSP. So to build on what Paul said earlier, there's a lot of this that you might already have, and then you just need to fill in those gaps and tighten things up to reach that score of 110. Incident response plan and reporting. Just like quality requirements, specifications, etc., you must expect your subcontractors to meet these requirements. Whoops, I skipped this slide. Incident response plan and reporting. This describes the overall plan for responding to the information security incidents for your facility. It defines the roles and responsibilities of the participants, type of incident, the relationships to other policies and procedures, and the reporting requirements. The goal of the incident response plan and reporting is to provide a framework to ensure that potential cybersecurity incidents are managed in an effective and consistent manner. Subcontractor flow down requirements. If you do contracting right now for the government, I know on the military side, you're expected to flow down everything already. So this is just one more thing that you need to add in to your POs and contracts when moving forward. So just like quality requirements, specifications, etc., you must expect your subcontractor to meet these requirements that you have to meet. Subcontractors can achieve compliance with the NIST 800-171 requirements in a variety of ways, including flow down of the 252.204-7012 clause in subcontract documents that contain detailed communications with the specific requirements of the DFARS cyber clause. This includes the mandate for subcontractors to create an SSP and associated POEMs, fully implement the requirements outlined in the clause of and NIST 800-171, report non-compliance to the DoD CIO's office within 30 days after contract award, report cyber incidents within 72 hours, formally flow down the DFARS cyber clause to all lower tier suppliers, subcontractors storing, processing, and or generating CDI, covered defense information. Be in full compliance with the DFARS cyber clause, and remember that as a prime contractor, you are ultimately liable for the compliance of your suppliers and subcontractors. Make sure the flow down of requirements and the validation of compliance is a formal, documented, and repeatable process. And then CMMC level 1 through 5. CMMC levels and the associated sets of processes and practices across domains are cumulative. In order for your organization to achieve a specific CMMC level, you must also demonstrate the achievement of the previous levels. There's no skipping steps in that process. So posting NIST 800-171 basic assessment results. Whoops. Okay. Path to basic assessment and SPRS. This is going from, you could be at any point in this flow, but if you're just starting out, you need to get your DMB DUNS number, create your SAM.gov account, register your entities within SAM, establish your electronic business point of contact, your CAGE code, validate your company data, establish your CAGE hierarchy. In PI, establish your vendor group. Again, assign your CAM, contract administrator, in PI. Establish your user accounts, and CAM approve SPRS cyber vendor role, and enter your basic assessment results. Supplier performance risk system, that's SPRS, and procurement integrated enterprise environment, which is PI. PI is your single sign-on portal for SPRS, and there are the two links to get to them. So in SPRS, adding your assessment. Step 1 in PI, select the SPRS icon. Step 2, select NIST SP 800-171 assessments. Step 3, create a header for your HLO or highest level owner. It's required once. If you don't see the create new HLO CAGE, you don't have a SPRS cyber vendor user role, so you'll have to go back and make sure you create that. I apologize for the technical issues I'm having. SPRS, adding an assessment. So the header view, the header page only displays the HLOs for a company and will contain up to 4 rows per HLO, 1 for each confidence level: basic, medium, high virtual, and high on-site. In summary, so you'll conduct your basic assessment concurrent with DMB SAM PI access. Obtain a data universal numbering system, DUNS, which you'll get from DNB. Register in system of award management, the SAM. Establish it within SAM, you'll establish your electronic business point of contact. You'll receive your CAGE or CAGEs, establish CAGE hierarchy, and assign HLO and IOs. Register in the procurement integrated enterprise environment, PI. Establish your CAM and obtain your SPRS user roles. Once that is done, access SPRS via PI, enter the header for your HLO, and enter your assessment results. So here's my contact information. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, we have PTACs across New York State, and each one of us is able to assist you in any issues that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mano. Thank you for your nice presentation. Just want to mention to the folks here that the PTAC's efforts to help manufacturing the DoD supply chain is very much appreciated, and we've been partnering with them for this is the second workshop that we've given, and they certainly can provide assistance to folks who really want to stay anchored in the DoD supply chain. So, Mano, thanks again, and we look forward to having more conversations with you at another time.
Thank you so much.
I'd like to move on to the next part of it, and once again, we'll have Mr. Paul Laporte come up, and Paul will finish the rest of the sections that we talked about earlier. So Paul, please take it away. Thanks. comments.
Yes. So in an effort to keep us on track with the agenda, I'm going to do a little bit of a lightning round for this kind of back half of the section, taking a look at kind of like the one or two most important things in each of these families. But again, I do want to stress that after the break, starting at about 11:30 or so, we're going to have a more detailed breakdown, answer questions, whatnot. So you're still going to get the content that you're looking for. We're just going to look through things quickly today in this particular part. So starting off with family 3.5, identification and authentication. A lot of this was already discussed earlier in terms of making sure that we have a specific identity to access our systems, that we actually need a username and a password, some sort of authentication, but we didn't talk about multi-factor authentication. And this is the idea that for anybody who's accessing our CUI, especially if they're doing it from outside of our network, so a VPN, remote desktop, whatever, we want to make sure, or if they have like an administrative account, privileged access, anything like that, we want to make sure that in addition to a username and a password, they are having a another factor of authentication, a second factor at least, which can be something like a code that's sent to your phone, or a key, like a thumb drive that's plugged into the system that it checks to make sure that you're accessing it. We want another level of authentication in addition to just a username and a password, because usernames and passwords are relatively secure, but they can be compromised fairly easily. So for those privileged systems, we really want to make sure that we have some sort of additional level of another factor of authentication. The three that you have are something you know, something you have, something you are. Something you know is your username and password. Something you have, again, could be like a code sent to your phone or a key that you have plugged in. Something you are would be biometrics, thumbprint scanning, retina scanning, things like that. We want to make sure that those are in place for our higher level accounts, and especially, again, for any accounts that are accessing our network remotely. We want to make sure that we have best practices in place, that employees are not using the same username and password across multiple systems, that we are deactivating our accounts that are inactive on our system. So if somebody hasn't logged in for like 30 to 90 days, we're actually reviewing those accounts and shutting them down as need be, all of those good things. And here's just some suggestions in terms of password best practices, because we need to have proper password policies in place. We want to make sure that they're appropriately lengthy and complex, and I have those suggestions listed here in terms of 12 characters. And then some sort of additional characters added in besides just uppercase, lowercase numbers, and special characters. You actually don't need to change your password every 90 days, like everybody says, or that like they used to say. Just create one strong password, keep it for as long as you can. We want to make sure that we're prohibiting password reuse for at least 24 other old passwords. Ideally, you should never be reusing a password. If somebody has to have their password reset, we're giving them a temporary one, and then they're putting in their own unique password the first time they log in. If we're storing passwords anywhere, we want to make sure that that file is encrypted so people can't easily steal it and intercept the information. And if people are typing in their passwords, we want to make sure that those are marked with like asterisks or dots and doesn't actually show the specific characters involved. Incident response, family 3.6. This is actually about developing a formal incident handling system. So again, specifically for security incidents, but for IT incidents as well, we're reporting, who had the incident, what it was, where it happened, when it happened. We want to actually document those things. You can either do it manually, so just typing it down on like a spreadsheet or a Word document, or writing it down in a notebook. You can use like a support inbox, so a specific email inbox that's used to kind of manage these incident responses and these specific like help desk requests. Or you could have something fancy like a managed ticketing system that'll keep track of help desk tickets and things like that. Once we have those incidents reported, we want to make sure that we are documenting them. This is any issues that might be handled by the IT or security team. We want to document the response to the particular incident. We want to retain those help desk requests or tickets for as long as we can. In the event that we need to present evidence to the Department of Defense or to our contractors in terms of that we were aware an incident happened and that we have a handle on it. And then finally, we want to test the system periodically just to make sure employees know how to use it. Employee testing can be simulations, so like fake phishing emails. They can be tabletop exercises with employees or just checklists they can go through. We also want to make sure that we're testing the response from the IT team. We can track their response time and how well they document those particular issues. So we can kind of test both sides of the system to make sure it's running as efficiently as possible. Family 3.7, this is specifically in regards to the maintenance of our systems and our equipment that has access to CUI. We want to make sure that we're regularly updating and maintaining the operating systems themselves, the software that they're running, any hardware or firmware that they may have as well. If there is any sort of equipment or media that's leaving our building, we want to make sure that they are sanitized of any CUI, whether that's using a program to wipe out the information on them or actually physically destroying them if we're getting rid of the system for whatever reason. And we want to make sure that we have some sort of controls on the tools, techniques, and equipment that we are using to conduct maintenance. And again, practically, that is mostly just making sure that employees can't make changes to their systems that we don't want them to, making sure that if we have any sort of remote maintenance teams or systems that are being used, multi-factor authentication is enabled for those. And if we have any sort of maintenance personnel like copier maintenance technicians or anything like that, that those individuals are being supervised whenever they are in the facility doing their work. Now, if you have somebody who's kind of like your go-to guy, you may not necessarily need that. But if you have a situation where someone from Xerox could show up and you don't necessarily know them, you want to make sure they're being supervised when they're doing their work. Media protection, family 3.8. So this is in regards to the protection of all types of media. So that can be physical media, so like paper. So again, just blueprints, notes, notebooks, whatever. Digital media, digital storage, so thumb drives, removable hard drives, things like that. We want to make sure that they are stored in secure locations. So any sort of media that's containing CUI should be stored somewhere where only people who have access to CUI can work on those. We want to make sure that that is documented in some sort of policies in terms of, who is allowed to do those things. They should be marked with some sort of specific marking to show that they contain CUI. And if it's the case of like a thumb drive, removable hard drive, even blueprints, we can have possession logs. So again, sign out sheets of who has these documents and where they have them, when they signed them out, when they signed them back in, things like that. We want to make sure that we're limiting CUI storage on digital media. So determining whether or not we want CUI to be stored on things like thumb drives at all. If so, what employees can access those? What sort of markings do they have? If they're leaving our building, what sort of restrictions do they have, or are they encrypted? So if somebody steals the device, then they can't just, get the information that's on it. And if we are getting rid of any sort of thumb drives, removable hard drives, what is the sanitation process for that? Physical destruction, software destruction, whatever it may be. Again, making sure that we have policies in place just for removable media in general. Do we want people to use thumb drives in our organization at all? Do we want people to be able to do things like plugging in removable hard drives and taking that information with them? If so, what are acceptable devices? Do we only want company issue devices? Do we want personal devices? If we're storing CUI, what specific type of thumb drive or what model or marking of thumb drive are we storing that on? What restrictions are on those devices? All of those things. Making sure that we have some sort of policy that says, hey, if you find a thumb drive laying around and you don't know who it belongs to, don't plug it into our systems. Making sure that we have that outlined so employees don't potentially cross-contaminate our network with anything infectious from somebody who may have just left the thumb drive in the parking lot, like the Stuxnet issue that Jake mentioned earlier. Also want to make sure that we're protecting our backup CUI. So if we're backing up our information, is that stored in a secure location? If this is on site, is it stored in a secure room or a secure area where somebody can't steal the drive or access the drive in a way that they could get that information? If it is stored offsite or in a cloud-based location, is that service that we're using NIST 800-171 compliant? Is their information being stored in a secure area? If we're backing up to, our owner's home or another office that we might have, is that secured enough reasonably to prevent somebody from accessing it that shouldn't be? Family 3.9, personnel security. This is looking at specifically actions in regards to our employees. We want to make sure that when we're hiring employees, that we are doing some sort of screening for them. So anybody handling CUI should have like a history check, social media screening. Criminal background checks aren't a bad idea. There aren't specific disqualifying factors, but we want to know what their background looks like before the DoD does their own check. And we want to periodically recheck existing employees if their permissions change or if something in their background comes up that we may need to investigate them further. If we're doing any sort of personnel action, like an employee transfer, promotion, termination, anything like that, we want to make sure that we're communicating those actions with our IT department. So the action takes place before the employee is notified of their termination or before they transfer. We want to make sure that there's not a single second where somebody no longer needs access to our CUI, but has the ability to access it. We want to coordinate with our IT department to prevent that from happening whenever we possibly can. Moving on to family 3.10 physical protection. This is just in specific regards to the actual physical things that we have that allow us to access and store CUI. Securing information system hardware. So our IT backbones, or our network, our modem, our firewalls, are they stored in a secure location? If we have to put switches or wireless access points around our office, are they stored in an area where people can't easily reach them or damage them or tamper with them? If we have paper or printouts that we have that contain CUI, are those being stored in a secure location? Is there some sort of logs of access to these secure areas, whether that is like a key card, like digital log, or if there's a sign in and sign out sheet, again, for if we're signing in or signing out prints or having people in particular areas. Is there any sort of internal surveillance like cameras or a security system, anything along those lines? Protecting the physical security facility itself. So making sure that people can't get access to the building that don't need it. Guarding our entry points, external surveillance, making sure that we have protocols for shift security. So when we have a shift change, who is responsible for locking the doors or opening new ones? You know, who has the keys, things like that. What are our physical visitor access procedures? So visitor entry and reception, logging visits. Do they have badges or specific markings to show that they're a visitor, and are they being supervised at all times? Physical access devices. So if we have keys or key cards, who has possession of those things? Where are they stored when they're not in use? Things like that. And then finally, CUI at alternate work sites. So secondary offices, field locations, home offices, are those meeting the same requirements that we are holding to our main office? Family 3.11 risk assessment. This is just making sure that we are periodically reviewing the risks and the assets that we have. So the CUI that we're trying to protect, any secure files, where those are stored, what we're doing to protect those things currently. Periodically, we want to make sure that we're scanning for vulnerabilities, whether that is just doing a logistical review or using some sort of scanning software to assist to make sure that we are securing ourselves as well as we can. And then if there's any sort of issues that come up in those particular scans and reviews, that we're remediating them accordingly. Family 3.12 is similar to 3.11, except we're actually assessing the security itself. So what are we currently doing to protect our information? Is it sufficient? What employees are doing that? What controls do we have in place? Are we testing those? Employee interviews, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing can all come into place for that. And then we are developing a report based on our security holes and flaws that might pop up, then developing a plan of action to remediate those things, specifically for any sort of weaknesses, milestones, and timelines. So again, that POAM. What are we going to do to fix it? When are we going to fix it by? And as new vulnerabilities are found, we can update this accordingly. As we resolve other ones, we can remove those issues. Monitoring existing controls, again, logs, scanning, things like that, making sure that we have the permissions and access that we need to set accordingly, reviewing any sort of alerts and reports and whatnot, and then developing a system security plan. Again, what are we doing currently? What are the rules in place to handle our information? Systems and communications protections. This is just making sure that we have the proper architecture in place, firewalls, routers, gateways, that we are making sure that we are sub-networking off our systems to restrict as much access to CUI as we possibly can. From the outside perspective, we're only allowing in traffic that we need to do day-to-day work. So we're not allowing people to connect remotely to our network who don't need to. If we have to send files to somebody, we want to protect that information as best we can via some sort of secure connection. We want to make sure that we're separating user and administrator functionality. We want to make sure that operating systems are updated. So there's patches for things like unintended resource transfer. It's pretty technical. If we have VPNs, we want to make sure that those cannot bridge to a personal network, that those are tunneled off and secured and just allow just straight one-way access to our network. Making sure we have secure transmission of CUI for any sort of protected files if they're encrypted, or sending them to somebody else. Cutting off sessions that need to be terminated after a period of inactivity. So if somebody is away from their computer, working from home, After 20 to 45 minutes, it actually severs the connection and they have to reconnect. If we have webcams or microphones or conference phones that are connected to our network of the internet, we want to make sure that they have indicator lights for when they're on and are disabled when not in use. Update things like mobile code, Java, JavaScript, ActiveX, things along those lines. And if we have any sort of voice over IP system, we want to make sure that that is being maintained and ideally separated from our systems that access CUI. And then our last item we have here is system and information integrity. This is making sure that if we have any sort of flaws that pop up, that they're reported and resolved in a timely manner, and that we are monitoring our traffic, internal and external. And then most importantly in this section is things like antivirus. So code protection at the server or client level. We want to make sure that every system has some sort of antivirus or anti-malware program installed on it, that those are regularly updating when new definitions are released. We want to make sure that live scanning is enabled. So if we download a folder or a file or install a thumb drive, that is scanning for viruses. And periodically we want to do full scans of all the systems once a day, once a week, whatever that might be. And then finally, we want to make sure that we are monitoring our security alerts. So again, you can use different services like the US CERT, this Computer Emergency Readiness Team, to maintain situational awareness. So if there's any particular items that come out in terms of software vulnerabilities for services you're using, you can make changes to those things or remove them and go to a new service, however you may determine. But you want to make sure you're staying up to date on new attacks and new information as it's released, and then make changes to your system based on those alerts and on those recommendations. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Everton, who is going to hand it over to our friends at RIT.
Thank you so much, Paul. Excellent job as usual, and thank you for keeping us on schedule. This is really great. I appreciate it. So now our next speaker is Miss Vivian Stover, and Vivian is with GCI at RIT. So Vivian, will you please take over? Thank you.
Thank you, Everton. Thank you, Fusebox, for having us here today. I am today with Justin, my director. We are both part of the New Global Cybersecurity Institute from RIT. I am the producer and business director of the Cyber Range and Training Center, and Justin is the director overall of the Cyber Range and Training Center. I'm going to pass it back to Justin just for the first slide so he can talk to you guys a little bit about the Global Cybersecurity Institute.
Hello, thanks, Vivi. So one thing that I think is important is that we built this facility to merge, to fuse really the people, processes, and technologies that are responsible for security. And often I think we contemplate security as a technology problem, but it's also about people and processes. And so what we created with this was an integrated approach at an institute-wide facility and resource that ties together psychology, mathematics, computing security. We have a department of computing security, computer science, software engineering, and so on, to attack these issues. We have psychology, I mentioned, public policy, different components of the cybersecurity issue. And when we built on that, we already had some successes. We had the National Security Agency and DHS recognize the department as a National Center of Academic Excellence. And so we then built this Cyber Range and Training Center on top of that. And one other thing that we had, you see at the bottom here, the Eaton Cybersecurity Safe Lab, which provides opportunity for students and faculty and staff to partner up to do systems and network security testing for a wide range of critical infrastructure partners. And so those testing relationships have resulted in really strong institutional knowledge for best practices in security assessment across several different critical infrastructures, manufacturing being one of the important ones, as well as finance, healthcare, telecommunications, transportation, energy, and so on. Eaton Corporation is one of the largest energy grid manufacturers, so we have a strong emphasis on the energy grid as well, and on manufacturing devices for the energy grid. That's their company. In any case, what does this sort of do? Well, with the range, and I'm not going to get into too much here because we have some ground to cover on some of the developments within the range. But for the range itself, part of the mandate was to create really immersive and interesting place for training, and really interesting training that takes advantage of that place. And what we've basically built is a facility that provides a bit of a proving ground for digital product development. So taking the engineering capabilities and building security into the product lifecycle is part of the mandate, and that's part of the opportunity with that facility. We have a back-end cloud that supports the replication of systems and in situ testing. And so, for example, this could create a shared resource that allows partner organizations, companies, to bring in their partners and then test global distribution and patching of embedded systems, for example. And so then it can also become a showcase arena for client-focused product demonstrations. In any case, the core mandate, when we're RIT, right? So we train students, that's what we do. And we allow for these kind of outreach efforts to benefit the community. And so partnership with RIT and with the Global Cybersecurity Institute in particular delivers students who are ready to do the job. And so that's really sort of the backdrop behind what Vivi's going to talk about next, which is really our boot camp evolution. So back over to you, Vivi.
Thank you. Yes, so I'm going to focus a little bit away from GCI as a whole. As you guys heard, we have great things happening at the Global Cybersecurity Institute, especially like Justin said, marrying not only the technology, but processes and people. And what we created here is a boot camp that came about because of COVID. We had this beautiful facility, we were ready and had plans for it, and then COVID hit. So we sat down and thought, what would be the best use of our resources? And we developed this cybersecurity boot camp. It started in August of 2020, and the focus was for individuals that were displaced by COVID that did not have an IT background. And so we created this great boot camp. And if you just go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit about it. The bootcamp started as a full-time 15-week bootcamp. We are now offering a 30-week part-time bootcamp that is actually starting in August. And this will provide a rapid upskilling of an individual's know-how in cybersecurity. Like I said, there is no IT skills necessary. And it provides training, is a simulation of an internship. So you do not have a classroom setting. It is a brand new idea that if you are immersed in an environment, in a situation, your brain learns better, learns faster, and it naturally, you're able to apply whatever you're learning directly into the workplace. So there is no gap between classroom learning and that. We have hands-on tasks that use real scenarios. They're really fun. It's a fun, interactive type of bootcamp for everyone. Next slide. So the effort for this bootcamp, in case you're interested, the reason we're here is just to bitch a little bit about it, is 10 to 20 hours of effort per week part-time. We understand that individuals have jobs, and we created this bootcamp especially for those individuals. Once you get accepted into the bootcamp, we put you in a help desk position as an intern, where you learn the basics of both Windows and Linux. And then within a couple of weeks, if you do well, you graduate and you start working for an SOC, Security Operating Center, where you start getting exposed to cybersecurity technology and cybersecurity concepts. This is a fully asynchronous bootcamp, meaning you can do it at your own time. There are, however, a little bit of teamwork effort and a couple of meetings that you're expected to participate. But like I said, there is no classroom setting. This is you doing the work, being supported by the great individuals that work here at RIT, both instructors and teaching assistants that will hand in hand work with you to advance you to the tickets that you have to work with, and the workload that you are asked to do as a full-time, or in this case, a part-time worker for a fictitious company. Next slide. So the perks of participating in the bootcamp is that you get 2 vouchers to pass the basic or initial certifications. It is the CompTIA Security Plus. And we have the cybersecurity first responder, or if you're really inclined to becoming a pen tester, the CompTIA Pen Test Plus. We also provide you with access for a full year to Pluralsight, which is a great resources for videos for you to learn everything, not only about cybersecurity, but also IT and even soft skills, how to present. If you want to learn how to act, I'm sure there's acting classes there as well. We focus, we give you personal attention during the bootcamp, and we pride ourselves in doing so. We are with you at every step of the way. If you have any issues, we have TAs and we have instructors at your fingertips that will that you can approach to work together to solve problems. Just if you had a senior worker in your team or a manager that you can reach out to. Yeah, next one. Here is a list of the domains that you'll get exposed to. As you can see, they're all fundamental skills for cybersecurity. Once you get through the bootcamp, you will be prepared to join the workforce as an entry-level cybersecurity professional. If you already have an IT background and you already have been exposed to some of your cybersecurity concepts and tasks, this will provide you with a solid fundamental set of skills that will allow you to do your job even better, or maybe get promoted into a cybersecurity position within your organization. Next slide. Here is a list of the tools that we use that you're going to get exposed to and learn how to use them via labs. So it's a hands-on, one-on-one. You work exclusively in the labs yourself. You don't have to work with a group of individuals. And getting familiar with those tools and learn how to use them so you can apply them in the real world. Next slide, Justin. The tuition is $10,000. We do have financial aid, so don't let the $10,000 dissuade you from applying. We have several scholarships based on donations from corporations. We also have financial aid available in case you need it. So give us a try. You might be surprised that we might be able to come up with some funds for you to be able to afford the cybersecurity bootcamp. The next slide, Justin. This is very important to share that this is not a college degree, but is rather a professional certificate. So at the end of the program, you're going to get a certificate from RIT saying that you have successfully passed the bootcamp, and then now you have the fundamental skills to become a cybersecurity professional. And now I have one last slide that I want to discuss with you guys that goes above and beyond you as an individual if you want to be part of the bootcamp, but this goes more to corporations. We made an analysis of why train your employees internally. If you have an internal employee that is doing great, but that is underutilized, and you have cybersecurity needs and you're not finding the right cybersecurity professional to fill it, consider training that individual. There is no downfall of doing so. As you can see here, the recruiting costs are minimal or don't exist. There is no risk of a bad hire because you already know this individual is devoted and is working great for you. There is a shorter or onboarding time. The individual already knows your company and it fits within your team environment. And there is less unproductive pay time. Again, for the same reasons, an individual that gets trained with our cybersecurity bootcamp that already works for your company, the combination of the immersion, they hit the floor running as soon as they graduate. And there is an increased commitment. We all know that if you put time and effort in our resources, especially our individuals, they feel valuable and they want to stay. So consider, bringing some of your workers through the bootcamp. And that's my spiel. I know that I tried to keep it to 15 minutes. Vivi Stover, again, is my name. That's my phone number, my email address. I would love to hear from you, even if you have questions, curiosities about the bootcamp. We're here to actually change people's lives. We believe in this program very much, especially if you want to get into the cybersecurity field. We need cybersecurity professionals. So with that, I'll pass it back to Corey and Everton. Thank you so much, guys.
Okay, thank you so much, Vivian. Thank you, Justin. It's great to work with you guys, and you'll see how great it is after Corey takes the floor shortly. So, Corey, you're up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Everton, and welcome back, everybody here. I would just like to comment, and Everton may get into this in a few moments here, but after our break, we'll come back at 11:30 or shortly after 11:30, and on behalf of the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing and the New York State Cybersecurity Assistance Grant Program, I will be awarding one company and one employee that is in attendance here this afternoon a full $10,000 scholarship to the Global Cybersecurity Institute and the boot camp. So I just want to start off by telling everybody that in hopes that everybody, after our short break, please come right back because we'd like to make that award. Justin, yeah, I see. All right, thank you. Justin's excited. So again, folks, good morning. My name is Corey Albrecht, and I'm the director here at MVCC's Advanced Institute for Manufacturing, and we are the MEP Center here for the 6-county Mohawk Valley region, and we are also administrators and managers of what's called the New York State Cybersecurity Assistance Program grant. Next slide. Okay, so what is the New York State Cybersecurity Assistance Program? So as I said, this is a grant program. It was awarded to Mohawk Valley Community College in May of last year. Due to the COVID environment, I believe we got going in the September or October timeframe of last year. And the grant does go for a full 12 months, so it concludes on September 30th of this year. As outlined by our grant partners, Empire State Development, we have 3 main tasks or objectives which we need to accomplish within this program. Task number 1 is to establish a marketing plan and an outreach plan with our partners, Empire State Development. And this plan will leverage the state's regional assets as it relates to cybersecurity programming. It also includes a series of up to 5 webinars and workshops to introduce the program and also to highlight the DFARS requirements. What we all just went through this morning is a direct result of one of our workshops and programs, which is again funded by the New York State Cybersecurity Assistance Program. And I'd also like to bring attention to a website that has a library of all the previous recorded workshops and webinars, and that is newyorkmep.org. And that's spelled New York, NEWYORK, MEP.org. If you please look for the events tab, you'll find the library of all the previous recorded webinars and workshops that we have had. Next slide, please. Task number 2, and I'll try to paraphrase to go through these to save a little bit of time here. Task number 2 is to plan and execute the webinars and workshops for New York State Department of Defense manufacturers. These webinars will train companies on how to perform NIST 800-171 self-assessment and will include guidance on how to assess all the self-assessment tools. A minimum of 250 defense manufacturers in the state of New York will be engaged through our workshops and our webinars series. Access to this material, the self-assessment training material, comes by the way of a program which was developed by the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing along with our partnership with FuseHub. It's called Teachable. And Everton in a few moments will go into a little bit on what that is and how it works. It is a 16-part on-demand training tool, which leads you through step by step by step on how to conduct an 800-171 self-assessment. That is a tool which was created as part of this grant program. And finally, task number 3 objective is to assist companies that do not have the financial and staff resources to perform the assessment on their own. At least 67 manufacturing DoD companies will be awarded through this grant with an 800-171 assessment, which will be performed by one of our implementation teams. This was a $6,000 award. We made that award to 67 defense contract manufacturers in the state. So we have met that guideline, and that is no longer available. However, the cohort is still available and open for your suppliers and your manufacturing partners that are in the DoD supply chain to join. I am also very pleased at this time to report that the 67 companies that we awarded with the assessment project were from all 10 regions in the state of New York. So we had very good coverage. And next slide, please. And finally, partners that are involved with this grant. Every successful grant partner, every successful grant project has strategic partners that move it forward and make all the success possible. As I stated, this grant originated at the state level with Empire State Development. It was awarded to Mohawk Valley Community College in our MEP Center, the Advanced Institute for Manufacturing, and we identified 3 strategic business partners in order to move this project forward and to help us implement this exciting grant. Those partners, again, are FuseHub, Twin State Technologies, and MTech, which is our MEP Center representing the Hudson Valley region. And next slide, please. And at this time, I would like to turn it back over to my colleague, Everton. Back to you, Everton.
Thank you very much, Corey. As you can see, we are running out of time here. So I think I'm going to run through this, pretty quickly. So Corey mentioned to you about the 250 members that we had to get. So how do we go about this? We decided that we're going to form a cohort of manufacturers, and we so proudly and boastfully said that we would be doing 320 members. The requirement from the grant was actually 250, but we wanted to do more. So the cohort membership looked like 320. And so what we plan to give from that is free membership, networking among cohort members in the DoD supply chain, and of course, the most attractive part will be the virtual office hours with Paul Laporte, our resident cyber expert. We were also providing access to our archive of cybersecurity webinars and workshops. So Paul, next slide, please. So, you'll be able to access our archive 5-part webinar and workshop series, which we talked about before. You'll have access to online training program for self-assessment through the Teachable program, which was mentioned before. And the training, of course, will provide content up to CMMC level 3. In addition, you'll get a letter of completion for the cohort members that finished the program. So I want to just touch a little bit on our objectives. Our objectives were in April 2021 to meet the 320 DoD manufacturers we talked about, and to conduct 6 or 7 physical assessment award with a $6,000 grant. Fact is, Corey mentioned, we've completed the awards, but we have not achieved the 320 DoD manufacturers by April. And so, we're an economic development group, and we really want New York State manufacturers to be prepared and to stay in the DoD supply chain. And so we've decided that, the fact that we didn't meet it in April, the grant expires, on September 30th. So we are going to work very hard to get as many as we can. We currently have 200 manufacturers in. We need 250 to meet the grant, but we really would like to add the additional 120. So September 30th is the deadline. So I'm asking all of you here in the training to talk to your suppliers or other associates who haven't, taken advantage of this. So please do so, and really access the Teachable program and the cohort so that you can really develop and meet CMMC level 3 at least when it comes around. Okay, Paul, could I have the other slide, please? Now, I'm not going to go through, I'm putting this up here to tell you how we plan to prepare you, but Paul mentioned it before. So I'll move on because it's very, very important that we stay on time. So I want to thank you, Corey, Jake, Paul, Nana, Vivian, Justin, for your wonderful participation. And this is going to end the presentation portion of the event.